I love that. Let's play. It's another episode of Six Star Business Podcast. And I'm here. I've got my co-host, Joanne Brooks, today. How you doing, Joanne?
Super well, thank you. Delighted to be here.
It's so good to have you. And our guest today is Martin Gillespie. I'm super excited to have you here, Martin. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm so looking forward to sharing the next hour or so together and having some fun.
Me too. All right. I love it when the guests are super raring to go and have fun. That's what life's meant to be full of, right? We need to have fun every day in everything we do. So let's get started. How about we get our listeners to know you a bit better, and I'll ask you a few questions. Could you share with us, where are you in the world? Like, where do you live? Who do you serve? And how do you serve them?
Okay, so obviously, with my accent, I'm from Sydney. But, and certainly one of the key things that I hope your listeners will enjoy is the Scottish humour wavelength. And if you're not born with Scottish ears, just pretend you're somebody from Braveheart and that you're brilliant for the next hour or so. Now, what do I do? What do I serve, and who am I, basically? So I've been lucky in life, and I've had several careers, but in the last 2-3 years, I established a company called GEM Wellness Warriors. And GEM stands for Growth, Empathy, and Mindset. Now, it also correlates to the most important asset we have in life, and that's one's health. We don't value, as human beings, our health well enough. And the mantra that I focus predominantly on is the relationship between your gut health, your mind, your head health, if that makes sense, and your mindset. And in the corporate language, you take that to the culture, performance, and the attraction that that organization can have to attract people to come and work for it. So it serves in that middle ground between corporate well-being and healthy thriving.
Fascinating. Genuinely, I am fascinated. And how about I get you to take us on the journey, Martin? Because to get to this point, you must have been through some interesting moments of your life to come to a point of wanting to help people with their wellness, and then you're talking about applying that to corporates and people in corporates.
Yeah.
So how about you share your journey with me?
Yeah, so let me take you back to being brought up in Scotland and normal childhood, if that makes sense. At the time, I was one of 5 kids. I was a middle child, so typical middle child syndrome. Parents hated me, no one loved me, all that kind of stuff. But my first degree actually is in hotel management with nutrition, because I'm of the era that I loved Fawlty Towers. And I loved watching how customer service happened. And when I was a little laddie, a little boy, we would go to hotels, and I was always intrigued with staff only, private. What happens behind the scenes to make people happy and customers enjoy their experience? So I studied hotel management and then realized that unless you are of the top 2, 3, 4, 5% of people, it's extremely long hours, low pay, and you're working 80 hours a week. And that's in a normal week. It's exhausting. One of the areas that I really enjoyed was marketing. So after I finished my bachelor's degree, I took a year out, and then I went back to university to study international marketing, which was fantastic. This was back in Glasgow, my hometown. And this was in the early 90s. I was going to say, just before the internet, we had computers that, we had a computer lab, not our own PC that we carried around with us, right? So I'm really showing my age here. And those computers, those Apple Mac computers that you lifted up from the back and you put the floppy disk in, brilliant. Then I graduated, and on that treadmill of life, I worked for a couple of companies, and one of the companies I worked for was actually a recruitment business. And I worked for them for several years in Scotland. And they had offices here in Australia. And they offered me the opportunity to transfer from Glasgow to Sydney, which at the time I was in my late 20s. I was single, still very attractive, but I was single and decided to make the move to the other side of the world. Um, and I have to say, one of the challenges I have, although we speak the same language, social differences were quite a gap that I was unaware of and did not know. Simple little things like you go to a supermarket, while in the UK you can go to a supermarket and buy everything. You had a bottle shop, you had X amount of different shops, and some of the language and phrases I was unaware of. And one of the challenges I had, for example, and hopefully I can share this, and if I have to edit some of the language, that's okay. But one of the phrases in Australian vernacular in the business world that I didn't know about was something gave you the shits. And I would give work to my EA, and every couple of days she would say, I've got the shits. And I had to say to her, would you like a couple of days off? Because obviously you've got some health problems. So that kind of got me on the framework of looking after health and understanding a little bit. And I was always intrigued with my first degree. I was always intrigued by the importance of proper nutrition. And I studied in a place called Aberdeen, which is the northern part of Scotland. And one of the key things that I wanted to learn was when people go out onto the oil rigs in the middle of the North Sea, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't have alcohol. Nutrition is a cornerstone of their well-being and productivity, but it's more than just what we eat, it's how we eat and how it's a part of that community of engaging conversations through food. So I was always brought up with seasonal food and real food for real health. And then obviously in the 90s and the early 2000s, the explosion of fast foods, takeaway foods, etc., was becoming prevalent. And at that time, the food pyramid was now becoming normalized in everyday society here in Australia, which was actually causing inflammation that people didn't know. Anyway, career-wise, I was working for a recruitment business, and I was recruiting for a sales executive for an IT company, and we couldn't find someone. So I had enough gonads to actually say, listen, I've got the perfect candidate. I'll bring the person with me. And I rocked up to the employer, and I said, oh, look, so the HR manager and the hiring manager, and I said, it's me. Why don't you employ me? Sales is sales, and 90% of the functionality is the same. I take some of the risk, and you take some of the risk. And that started an 18-year career in technology, going from hardware to cybersecurity, which was incredible. And being involved in cybersecurity, even now, was quite intoxicating because it was a massive learning for me. Outside my comfort zone, working on huge opportunities and having a lot of fun with some really smart people. But my love was always within nutrition and within well-being. And one of the things that I always got involved in was the well-being committees and organizations and driving. You've got to look after your staff. You've got to make sure that the staff don't get burned out. The rewards are great, but if you're asking people to work till 11 o'clock at night and expect them to be on an airplane at 6 in the morning, things are going to go off kilter. And I was one of them on that career pathway of the white picket fence, if that makes sense, of, almost being identified by the job title I had and the position title and being, if you want to call it, lost. And I was fortunate enough in early 2000s, I met a lady who then became my wife, and got married, had 2 children. Thankfully, she was Australian, so I got citizenship, so that was great. And then the wheels started falling off. And one of the things, and I know we spoke about this before, Evelyn, is that as a man, I did not seek or ask for help. I thought I was impervious because I was defined by the job that I was doing. I was, dare I say it, bringing home the bacon, paying the mortgage, paying all that kind of stuff. And I thought that that was important. However, several things started happening. And in 2010, my mum passed away in Scotland. And it was the first time, although grandparents had passed and other relatives, it was the first time someone so close to me had passed. And I didn't deal with that grief. What I did do was throw myself into work. And all the other things were falling apart around me, which I did not see because I could not see it. And then in 2011, we found out that my parents had been married for 43 years, but my father had a mistress for 35 of those, and I actually have another brother in Scotland. Again, I did not seek any help because, let's face it, I'm a bloke. We just deal with this stuff. And then in 2012, I remember sitting and having a goal, like lots of people have. And my kids were 5 and 3 at the time. And having a goal of, I'm turning 42 this year. I'm a runner. That's what part of what I do outside my work life. I want to run a marathon, 42 kilometers in your 42nd year. Kind of makes sense. However, that year was a year of hell. In April of that year, my young sister, at the age of 37, had fought a fantastic battle with breast cancer, and she died in April. 6 weeks later, my father was in his house, and he was on a wall around his garden, and the wall was about 6 foot in height, so about 180 meters. And he overstretched, and in his top pocket was a pair of garden secateurs, and as he fell off the wall, the secateurs pierced him in the heart, and he bled to death. 6 months after that, my 6-year marriage collapsed. And then 6 weeks after that, in November 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. So I said a lot of bad words, generally beginning with the 6th letter of the alphabet and 4 letters long. And also in that time, which is a band-aid for masking a lot of emotions, I was making love to Dan Murphy's a lot. Because grabbing a bottle of wine wasn't enough, grabbing 2 bottles of wine, and not understanding that when you would walk into your local Dan Murphy's, when they call you by name, you kind of know that you've got a problem. But I couldn't address that because for me, alcohol was I was not a functional alcoholic, but I was masking a lot of the pain, anger, and emotions through alcohol. And not once did I realize that I needed help. When I got told that I had stage 4 cancer, that's when I collapsed, basically. And I cannot remember much of the consultation because I froze. And all I did was cry. And it was the insight of my hematologist that had said, "You're seeing a psychologist tomorrow. You need help." And I'm so thankful of that because that was a real pivotal point for me. Now, going through chemotherapy, the only 2 downsides of chemotherapy gave me a Scottish accent and a tremendous sense of humour, of which both I'm very, very grateful for. And that took me on a pathway that I started learning. I went back to my first love about nutrition, and I started studying nutritional environmental medicine through a private college here in Australia called ACNAM, Australasian College of Nutritional Environmental Medicine. And that's focused on teaching general practitioners holistic medical practices. And I passed the exams, and the whole faculty were amazed that how can you, as a non-medic, pass these exams? Fast forward about a year after that, I was actually approached by the board to become a board member to help evangelize the framework of nutritional medicine. That gave me the confidence to go, I'm no longer serving my purpose working in cybersecurity. My purpose is looking at going into corporates, demystifying some of the medical terminology, sharing part of my story as a bloke to actually change people's lives. And if one person, like in this podcast, if it resonates with one person, you have that ripple impact. So now I go in and I present and I work with both male and female, but I have done a lot of work with men. And I'm currently leading a couple of workshops with executive men who, for privacy reasons, don't want to be known, if that makes sense. But the fact that I can get 8 men in a room and talk about emotions is absolutely fantastic. So that's part of what I do both here in Australia and overseas. And at times it does feel as if you're shoveling proverbial uphill, because it's not about a magic pill. It's about looking after the factors of real health, which is eating well, sleeping well, having proper boundaries, which we don't learn. And also having, if you want to call it, a balance, and changing that mindset of surviving and stress to being thankful and thriving.
Good grief. Wow. What a story, Martin. Lots of things that resonate with me, and I'm sure it does with you, Av. But what I really, I'm actually a bit. I need to absorb this. I need to take it in. I need you to jump in, Av, because wow.
Okay, you process, Joanne.
I need to process that.
You,
Goodness.
okay, I do have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to thank you, Martin, for being so open with what you shared just then. That's not easy, not even to just mention it. It's, let alone go through it. And I think most of our listeners would probably be a little shocked at hearing that, because it is just so big. That's the word that I'm going to give it. Traumatically big. What was the point at which you thought or knew inside of yourself that you had to go into out of cybersecurity and into medicine? Was it the cancer diagnosis, or was it a little bit after that?
So when Denise, who was my sister, when she was diagnosed with it, she'd been diagnosed sort of 4 years prior. That sort of reignited my passion to go, wait a minute, cancer has got so many different forms. But what is cancer? And I had this personal interest in what is cancer. As I've grown up, and now I'm on the pathway that cancer is actually metabolic syndrome on steroids. And let me define that a little bit more from an unmedical term. Metabolic syndrome is hyperinsulin in your gut, caused by processed foods, stress, not being able to regulate your emotions. And all it takes is one rogue cell to be cancerous, because we all have cancer in our bodies. But it just takes one to explode, and then it multiplies, divides, multiplies. So from the point of view, I'm so attracted to that space. At times I've had to take a step back going, I'm too involved. And interestingly, I can pick up from both of you. One of the things coming through cancer, I remember giving a presentation to a charity organization, and it was too soon. I was too emotionally attached to it. And I was almost in tears on stage, because this was me that went through this. And there's hundreds of people, like in Australia, every single day, there will be hundreds of people diagnosed with several different types of cancer. But we need to get to the root cause, and cancer is caused by inflammation, which, if you look at inflammation in your gut, every single day, we are the CEO of over 40 trillion cells in our gut. What are we doing to harm them, but also what are we doing to nurture them? And when I'm in corporate environment, the language I use on this, instead of using metabolic syndrome, I actually do the language of most people in corporate are familiar with the phrase a performance review. What would your gut say to your brain, and what would your brain say to your gut? Thanks for filling me with crap. So you're not going to get that mental agility. So for me, it's also going back to almost being childlike. And I have a philosophy of your ABC. Always be curious.
I love the ABC. They're my initials, by the way. And I think
What's
I
the
am
B for?
naturally. Pardon?
What's the B for?
Oh, all right. I don't share this, but I'm going to share this on live air. Bidet. Okay,
Bidet.
there we go.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So I take it that the curiosity you said was sparked when your sister got diagnosed, and then you sort of went down a path. Yeah, and was it then after your diagnosis that you had to make that transition, that career change?
Yeah, and one of the key things, so in order to go through that change, I also had to go through my own personal journey. And when I was going through chemotherapy, I would go and get some advice from nutritionists and dietitians. Now, they're two different modalities, except none of them really gave a monkeys about the fact that I was taking and consuming really toxic drugs. And to share an example, most people are familiar with pins and needles that you get in your fingers, right? That feeling. In the medical term, it can go further to a thing called peripheral neuropathy, where you have no feelings in your fingers. And that's caused by a lack of what you call B12. That's common in drugs that are used to fight cancer. When I'm going to see a dietitian, I'm going, I've got peripheral neuropathy. Don't care, eat this. Here's a food pyramid. Have Weet-Bix for breakfast. Have 10 vegetables a day. Have plenty of fruit. And I'm going, but fruit's a natural sugar. Sugar and cancer don't go. So that curiosity and the dare I say, part of the frustration as well, Aveline, going, wait a minute, I'm going to see these experts and they don't really care about my health. They're just ticking a box. So again, it ignited my curiosity. And when I would be going home after working, still in Cyberland, I'd be going home and I would be an avid reader. Anything I would get around, let's think differently. And that's where studying nutritional medicine got me involved in, well, wait a minute, not just is the food tainted that we are eating on a regular basis, but where's it coming from? The soil here in Australia is depleted of many, many minerals. So instead of jumping straight to, let's take thousands of supplements, let's eliminate the things that are making us ill in the first place. And it got my curiosity going. And in order to transition, what I started doing, I started making some lists up of people in work and people in my peer group. And I would send weekly emails on some of the ramblings that I had, and people loved them. And it was just one of those things. I'd be talking about, do you know that zinc is so important for men? And it is absorbed through red meat. And if you don't have enough zinc, men of a certain age, that can impact their prostate gland. So that got people's attention. Started writing about vitamin D, curiously asking, is vitamin D a vitamin or a hormone? And again, people are, I was receiving some things, and I was using some social media tools, especially LinkedIn. And this was pre-COVID as well, putting things out there just to sort of a different frame of mind. And I actually had to put a preface around going, this is my opinion, this is not the company I'm representing. But the feedback I was receiving going, this is good stuff, I'm going, this is a calling for me. I need to get out of corporate land. And corporate land was doing a restructure just after COVID hit. So I took a package and went, bingo, it's now time. And, you know, I did mention a few of those F words a few times because I'm thinking, what am I doing? What have I just done? And it was a big goal to do that, but it's been like any small business, you've got the ups and downs. But if it's serving a purpose, it keeps you motivated every single day. And as I said before, if I'm helping one person every single day, you can't put that amount of money in my back pocket or in my bank account. And one massive claim to fame that I have is that in the last, this is my third year of trading, I've helped half a dozen people from taking their lives. And that's, a massive, massive, I feel quite blessed to be able to do that. And I've been recognized with, again, it's not a kind of Aussie thing, but screw it, let's do it. I've been recognized as one of the top 500 mental health practitioners globally for projects that I was doing over COVID, particularly with men's emotional groups. And that was just a simple little thing, getting men to actually value who they are and to slow down, not typical A mentality, and actually re-engage with the most important person in their life, and that's themselves.
I suspect, Martin, that you've impacted more people than those few that you've helped not take.
I agree with you. I've learned how to look at the unconscious mindset, and there's a wrath of other people, and I just feel very honored to be able to impact it. And it's gone both ways, because sometimes I felt down, and some of that joy that of people that I've helped, just picking up the phone and saying, "How you doing, Martin?" been fantastic, because I'm only human as well. But I also have, Joanne, I also have been quite clever. I do have a circle of angels around me, whereby there are certain things that are outside my wheelhouse I will recommend to, I was going to say smarter people, but people with different mentalities and modalities than I have.
And that's so important, right? In any business, anything that you do, yourself where you're not in flow, or you have the gaps, so that you can provide that all-rounded service to your customers. But for me, I just want to again also thank you, because it's what you're doing is so impactful for an audience who don't naturally go, I need some help.
And it's funny you say that, because I remember presenting several years ago, and it was, and look, I've got two minds around the "Are you okay" day, if that makes sense. I think it's fantastic, the initiative on it, but it should be something that we speak about every single day. But if it ticks the box of that well-being calendar, that's great. And I remember presenting, and I shared some of my story, and you could hear a pin drop. And one of the key things that I'm grateful for is the advancements in technology and medicine, with efficacy, without which I would not be here today. And in Australia, we've got some fantastic stuff. If you take it, for example, one of the Australian darlings, cochlear hearing implants, absolutely fantastic, right? We sometimes don't appreciate the smartness of what we have on our own doorstep. And sometimes you have to take your cap off and go, that's fantastic. But going back to the quintessential things, if you look at anybody in their whole journey of life, up and down, etc., one of the key things they've always said, oh, at least you've got your health. I was at an event about a year ago, and it was full of very high net worth individuals. The smell of testosterone was absolutely huge, and that was just the 10% females that were there. They're all overweight, all big. They're all on more medication than Chemist Warehouse. And one of the things that they would say is, or my doctor prescribed this drug, but he didn't say anything about my diet, so I don't have to alter what I'm eating. And in Australia, similar to that in the UK, to become a general practitioner, a doctor, let me ask you both, you spent 7 years at university. How much do you think they have on nutritional medicine?
Minimal, I would expect.
My understanding, I think, is what is it, like half a day?
3 hours.
3 hours, I was close, yeah.
3 hours.
You think?
3 hours. And one of the key things that I really enjoyed, I'm no longer on the board, but I really enjoyed being on the board, was actually understanding the mentality of medics. Medics are fantastic disease managers. Now, let me put a caveat there. There are some incredible trailblazers that are changing the face of medicine, and not just here in Australia, but globally. In Australia, we have some of the smartest people who question this. And I've been lucky enough to be involved with people like that, like Dr. James Mukey, who's Australian of the Year 2020, Dr. Gary Feckey, who was the first medic in the world to be struck off the medical board. And he's based in Tasmania. And no one had heard of Tasmania outside Australia because he had the audacity to actually start saying to patients, if you start eating properly, you will not need an operation. You can reverse type 2 diabetes 90% of the time with proper nutrition. Now, people are still in the dark ages around type 2 diabetes. And in the denial phase of it as well. Oh, it won't happen to me, or I'll get medication, or I'll get put on a statin for the rest of my life. Are you aware of what these actually do to your body? Are they ever explained to you as a patient? No. And it's quite funny. I'm now hitting, in fact, it'll be my birthday next week. I hit I'm over the age of 50 plus 10 plus GST. And a lot of my mates that I went to uni and school were all friends on social media, and they're going, Martin, what's your views on HRT? And this is the females, obviously, not the males, right? And I'm telling them a couple of things. And one of the key things that people don't realize that with medication, there's a lot of copper in them. Now, copper is an essential mineral we need in our gut. But if you have excess copper, and this actually goes for you poor females here, if you've been on the contraceptive pill and then your doctor puts you on HRT medication through menopause, that's why you will get insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome in your gut. And that is a pathway for disease. Now, I'm not against both of these, but what I'm trying to promote is be mindful of the impact that these will have on your physical health and also your mental health. And I can guarantee that not once would a doctor tell you this.
Thank you, Martin. It's so refreshing to hear someone speak about topics that we largely take for granted, or society has taken for granted, that everything's under control, and or it's swept under the rug, or I'll just go down to the chemist or the doctor. And the reason this is so relevant, I think, to this podcast as well, for those listeners who are going, but he's talking about nutrition, and okay, I'm a guy, I don't need to take HRT, or what's the relevance here? The relevance is that health is an intrinsic part of ourselves. You can't separate out health from the being that you are in your business or your career. So if you're not conscious of your health, how can you be at your best? How can you bring your best self to your work, to your family, to your life, to your customers? So I'm just drawing the connection here for our listeners in case they're kind of, still stuck in the, questioning the topic.
So I think you make a really good point there. And one of the things that I've been working on with corporates this year in particular is the language and the mindset about the importance of reconnecting with your workmates in a physical environment. So if you take it, we've been used to now working from home an awful lot. And I do believe the hybrid model will still exist. However, one key thing that we have when we become a parent, the advice that we generally get is, oh, it takes a village to bring up children. Well, guess what? It also takes a village for your good mental and emotional well-being as an adult. Your workmates are part of that. So going in to see your workmates at least once a week, making the effort, believe it or not, they will be pleased to see you. They also might notice things about you that you haven't seen. And, bearing in mind over the last couple of years, a lot of people may have put on weight with the COVID kilos, or their mental health has suffered, etc. Sometimes it takes someone from the outside to be observant to pick this up. And that's really important, that your workmates could be that person. And the other bit that I drive is, when you go to your physical place of work, you're getting movement, you're getting vitamin D, you're exercising, you're having a change of scene, and all of that is important for your health. So it's not just about, the nutrition is a key pillar of that, but also so is the stimulation that you have to have. And getting fresh air. I was going to say breathing in the fumes when you go into the city centre, and I don't mean it that way, but just getting a different environment is very, very good for you. And it builds your resilience, which I think we have to rebuild because it's quite fragile at the moment.
You make such a good point there. And what you're talking about is 100% the same as a business owner who needs a community. Teammates is the same as having that close network. And one of the dangers, I think, of a business owner, like Joanne, you work from home. We can see you in your office there. I work from home. And when we're so busy working from home as business owners, we don't get that opportunity like people in a corporate do to actually travel, connect face to face. So it's harder for us. And that's why I now relish the opportunity to have these in-person times, of connection and being. And for me, I've got to schedule time outside and time in nature, and I know Joanne does as well every day. It's really important. And it sounds so simple, yet I just wonder how many people actually do it.
So it's funny, one of the things that I practiced a few times before going public, if that makes sense. I was quite blessed. When I set up my business, around the same time, a friend of mine set up a local community newspaper, and I started writing for that. And from the back of that, I thought, this is a great opportunity to get some practice before taking it to corporate. So I would go to the local RSL clubs and try some of the material that I was doing. And bearing in mind, this is people who are a lot older than what we are, right? They're in their 70s, 80s, whatever. A lot of them had maybe PTSD from being in the service, if that makes sense. So I would bring a couple of things that were different. And I remember on 2 occasions, I brought a mate along to actually observe me, to get some feedback, because we don't, again, one of the key things that we sometimes fail to receive properly is constructive feedback, because our defenses go up too quickly. And one of the things that, and he's Irish, he said, Martin, because I put, when I present, I actually close by putting people into meditation, but I call it breathing, because the mindset of meditation, no, I'm not going to do that, of breathing exercises. And he said, Martin, the fact that you're from Scotland and you're doing this modality about breathing and meditation, it makes it so ridiculously powerful, because you don't expect it from this guy from Glasgow to come up with this empathetic heart and telling people how to give themselves a pat in the back. And this is an Irish guy and a Scotsman, and we go, "Jeez, sounds like a practical joke here." But I think that individuality is really important. That you bring that part of your being to your work environment, to how you switch off, and you actually become a more thriving person. And one of the benefits about thriving is that, again, for those listening to this from Scottish background, we Scots roll the letter R. So you roll the letter R and your body vibrates when you say thriving, which makes you feel much better.
You say that so well. It excites me just listening to it, but I do it terribly, so I'm not going to try. But it's wonderful. Now, this is the Six Star Business Podcast, Martin. So I've got a question for you.
Yep.
What does being six star mean to you?
It's a great question. Six star means questioning and always being inquisitive, being curious, but also believing in yourself and believing that you have got something that can make a difference. And my other bit around that six star, which is really important, always collaborate with others in your space.
Oh, I love that. As you expect, Aveline, I will always dial into people who want to collaborate because that's inquisitive, curious, because what we all know is you get this right, you get that right, and I often, people hear all that, can you be the best version of you for your business and for the customers that you serve? So you sing a hymn to me that just
Yeah, I agree. It's fabulous. Really wonderful. I've got another question. How difficult do you think it is in today's world for someone to be six star?
I think there's an awful lot of prejudice still around, especially for those wanting to try and do it in an entrepreneurial spirit. I think it can be quite difficult, but you've also got to have that self-belief. And I think one of the essence about being six star is removing that mindset that you work 8 to 5. You've, you know, I would say the first year of my business, I struggled having my own self boundaries because at 8 o'clock at night, I would have this creative thoughts. I would go into this, writing mode. Next thing I know, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Right. And we've all been there. But it's also, I think, one of the great things is that you can, and I'm going to use the word pivot, and I mean it in the proper sense. Always learn to embrace your mistakes. And I think one of the key things as an entrepreneur and being six star is you know when to stop and pivot over here. And you take that responsibility. And that's really important. And I think one of the key things, I know from a personal point of view, when you're in a corporate environment, you become obsessed with what people think of you. When you run your own business, you don't care. You still want the business, but you don't care what because people will try and put you down. And that's the people who actually need help.
That's a great point, Martin. I heard someone say this the other day, that the moment that you've already made the decision and you're already in your own business, a lot of that mental toughness and the mindset work has been done because you're already doing your own thing, versus perhaps being in a corporate and in a job or on a hamster wheel that you don't enjoy. And the fact that you've already chosen to go out alone, you've already chosen to be different right there.
And I think, so to share one of the examples that, you talk about pivoting and about having creative thoughts. As we know, corporate Australia from 16th of December to the 5th of February is dead. It's holiday time. So I made the decision about 2 months ago thinking, I'm going to go to the UK for a month. One, I can work in the UK. I haven't been back in the UK for about 6 or 7 years. But it allows me to actually go there and see what's happening and broaden my network. I do a little bit of business over there, but broaden my network. So I went out on a limb, and again through social media, it's particularly, dare I say it, plugging LinkedIn in particular, which is a great tool. I looked at a lot of my contacts in the UK, and I'm actually meeting the board of the equivalent of Lifeline when I'm back in the UK to talk about what I'm doing. Now that would never, so you've got to be able to sort of go, right, let's just put it out there on a limb. And I was looking at what they were doing, and again, they do not talk about the connection between nutrition and mindset. Now they're doing some fantastic work. Give them credit where credit's due, and I think also that's another thing as a entrepreneur. I believe that you give gratitude to others more than you do in the corporate environment, because in the corporate environment, you're too busy bad mouthing your competition.
Or pulling the daggers out of your back from your colleagues. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. Or the Excel spreadsheet that keeps you awake till 11 o'clock at night kind of stuff, and no one gives a monkeys about it 3 days later.
okay. Yeah, Evelyn, you made the comment about when you step into entrepreneurship, your mindset's pretty much there. But I think what our entrepreneurs need to be mindful of is enthusiasm, that rigor, that grit, etc. And that's where a lot of people can slip. The importance of doing things differently and being connected with other people that can support and lift and help and challenge and guide and hold you accountable, right? And it's something interesting. Something that I've been thinking about recently is I spend too much time sitting here. I do a lot of conversations, but one of the things that I will be implementing is I'm going to get out of this office and go and do work somewhere else. Like, go sit in a cafe, go get some fresh air. There are things that you can do that I don't need to be right here. And so what can I do for 2023 that's actually going to help me to be more creative, get that fresh air, that vitamin D, as you say, Martin, and just give me a different, fresh perspective. It's important.
I think that, so I'm a morning riser. I generally get up at 5 most mornings. And I will tend to either, I'm a runner, if I'm not going out to run or do yoga, I will spend an hour reading in the morning. And that sets the framework and of the rest of my day, and it gets his creative juices going. And I do regularly meditate, because I think that, and again, one of the key things, if you're not connecting with yourself, you're going to be still on that hamster wheel. And that's not going to serve any purpose whatsoever. And I think one of the key things as it is working on your own small business is, don't feel that you have to put those boundaries up, that you have to work these times, if that makes sense. If you feel at 10 o'clock in the morning, you want to go and get a coffee in the coffee shop that's along the road, or you want to do your domestic stuff, go and do them. It's outside school zones, so you can drive faster. You don't have the yummy mummies picking up the kids from school. Go and do them, because you are the master of your own destiny. And embrace that, because you've worked bloody hard to be where you are. and you sacrifice a lot of things as an entrepreneur. You sacrifice a lot of your personal time, which people would perceive as personal time. Most of us work weekends or will work silly hours. So don't beat yourself up about, I'm having a bad day, I'm just going to sit on my egg chair and meditate and drink coffee all day. Just bloody enjoy it.
You make a really good point there, Martin, because I think it's you and not feel guilty about it. And I did one of those days last week. I went, oh, geez, this is a really crap day. I'm just going to stop because it's not which is very pleasant and enabled. It's actually okay to take those moments and look after ourselves.
I think one of the key, and I know you're going to ask me this question, Evelyn, one of the key takeaways that I would give people is, if you are working from home, and now we're moving into the summer months here in Australia, take your shoes off, take your socks off if you're wearing socks, stand on your grass for 10 minutes. Walk around the grass, earth yourself. If you can't get your ass out in nature, stand on the grass, right? Just reconnect with Mother Nature and just pause. One of the key things that one of the things that I'm very proud of, again, is that a lot of the presentations I present around storytelling, and I'll give you a brief example. One key thing that I know that the three of us do is we know how to drive a car, right? But if we see a red light in the distance, what do we have to do to make the car stop? We have to ask a tool, which is called the brake, to slow that vehicle down. What happens metaphorically if we don't have a brake as human beings? We will keep going and drive a risk of running that red light. We don't know what's on the other side of that red light. So if you keep going the way you are going, you're running a risk of causing an impact to your physical health, your mental health, emotional health. So slow down. You need to slow down on a daily basis, and you need, again, one of the key things that people might not understand, and we spoke about this earlier, about the benefits of good nutrition will have the impact of making sure that you have good sleep and good quality sleep. And sleep is the Scottish superpower given to the world because it's free, but we don't value it enough. How many executives in the executive corporate world brag around going to bed at midnight and they're the first people in the gym at 5:30 in the morning? That serves no purpose whatsoever. That's about ego and not energy. So if you do go to bed at midnight, do yourself a favor and don't get out of bed till 7:30, 8 o'clock. Your body needs to rest. And one of the things that I talk about, if you want to be a hottie, which I know you both are, if you want to be healthy on the inside, eat proper foods.
I've never been called a HOTI hottie before, Martin, but I'm honoured.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's nice.
You can take it. It's fine. Joanne's been called it as well, so you can share it.
Love it.
I love everything you stand for, Martin. I love the message that you bring, and I'm really grateful for the way that you've brought this awareness into the groups that you're working with corporates and other people, and just I can see how passionate you are. I did have a question that was lingering earlier in the conversation, so I do want to get this in. What is your deeper, bigger purpose for what you're doing?
So when I started the business, my purpose was really focused on men's well-being. And I've had to expand that because without men, you're not going to have women. So my purpose really is actually to connect 1 million men and women together every day on an application, asking the question, what makes your heart dance today?
That is a
You know, and
beautiful
one of the
question.
things that I present around the fact that, and we can do this together actually, we can do it without the bit of going into meditation. So if you take your right hand, get this right, yes, your right hand, and put it over your heart, you've got four main chambers in your heart, two upper, two lower. If you change those chambers to representing love, light, laughter, and connection, you've just given yourself a heart hug. And that's the most important person in your world on a daily basis.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. That was gold.
Yeah.
I hope our listeners have fully grasped the enormity of this subject, and there's so much amazing wealth and gold lying in everything, both that I heard, but also little bits like that I might have missed because my mind was still focused on the words, 3 sentences back. So it might be that you need to listen to it a couple of times to get everything. So we're a little bit over our intended time, but I know that you are happy to keep talking, Martin, and I just want to thank you for that because I've just loved everything that we've talked about. You've given us so much. Now our audience is largely business owners, and I would love to get from you some tidbits or advice or something you could leave them with.
Sure. So one of the things I like to emphasize is around your own metabolic health. And I made the analogy about driving a car. If someone bumps into your car once or twice, you would take it into the car mechanic. It gets serviced at least once a year. Your biggest vehicle is your human body. You have a day that is significant to each and every one of your listeners, and that date is your birthday. Go and check in with a full integrative medical practitioner for a full health check on your birthday. And if you're in a partnership or if you have a significant other, let them know that that's what you're doing. And here's a call out, particularly for men here. If you say that to your significant other and then say, could you please come with me? You're showing beautiful courage and vulnerability at the value that you have with your partner, but more importantly, the value you have on your own health.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that. That was, it was awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, very. Just beautiful. Joanne, have you got any final questions for Martin? We've lost Joanne. That's
We've lost
okay.
you.
It's going to
That's all right. She might pop back in. Oh, there she is.
She's, I just kept talking.
Sorry.
But
You
I'll
disappeared.
perspective so you can hear it. I don't have a question, but I guess I have a comment. What I do particularly resonate with is always be curious, because that is the foundation of curious about how I feel, am I put in my body. Now, I know that will pick that up.
It will. It's okay. The editors will do a good job. All right. Just a bit of a pause, and I'll finish up.
Yeah.
Martin, have you got any final parting words for us today?
Yeah, one of the key things, the drivers that I would say is that always have a bit of balance around what you're doing. And if you are feeling down whatsoever, there's plenty of support out there. Making that first call is can be the biggest step of improving your metabolic health. And if you've never thought about calling one of the helplines before, or also as a small business owner, having a coach to help hold your hand through some of the ups and downs is really important. Now, bit of plug, I do some coaching, but I only do it on a handful of bases. But getting someone to talk you through and just holding that space. And also remember, we spoke about being in nature. One of the things that we didn't talk about, which is extremely powerful, is just being present in the power of silence. When you're out walking with someone, you might not need to say anything. Your presence, being with that person, is gold. And that could also be remotely at this moment in time as well. Like through technology, we can FaceTime, we can do all this kind of stuff, what we're doing here today. That's a critical part of being well.
Thank you, Martin. So much there that we can all absorb, take on, learn from, act on, and improve our lives upon. Really, there's a lot there. It's a topic that we need to talk about more. And I love that you've gone deep in this today. And thank you for bringing all of your genius and your purpose and your heart, your stories and your Scottish accent to the table today. It's been a joy.
Look, I appreciate that, and thank you. Before I came on here, I did listen to Billy Connolly a couple of times, but I thought some of the language was a little bit inappropriate for your platform, so I've edited that out just for Joanne's purpose only.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Enjoy your trip back to the UK, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the new year.
Thank you, and thanks for the time this afternoon, ladies. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It has. Thank you.